Dear colleagues, we carry on the work with the work of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians, and while everybody is coming to the premises, we will show you some video. And so please, attention to the screen.
I wanted to show you some slides on the IPU petition for democracy. So as you know, we celebrated, and you have celebrated in your parliaments on 15th of September, the International Day of Democracy, a very important day for the IPU and for you as member parliaments of the organization. The IPU has launched a petition on the occasion of the International Day of Democracy. This petition is for democracy. If you support democracy, you should sign this petition. And we are also asking you to kindly share this petition as widely as possible with your own networks. I know many of you are on Twitter, you are on Facebook, you are so active on social media, you also have your own websites. So please, we ask you to embody this petition and share it as widely as possible. The petition aims at gathering people's support to democracy. Democracy cannot be in danger nowadays. In 2017, democracy should not be in danger. And what we are doing through this petition is to invite people to recommit to democracy, to reconsider how important democracy is, and to give their opinions on what is important to preserve democracy and to keep it growing everywhere. The petition exists in 4 languages, as Madam Chairperson said this morning. I was really hoping to have some slides to be able to show to you, but I can't see the slides moving. But as we don't have enough time, please note down that the petition can be accessed and signed on campaign.ipu.org. Very good. Now we have the slides. Can you put the first slide, please? The first one, please. Thank you very much. So this is where you can find the petition, campaign.ipu.org. And you can choose the language in which you would like to sign the petition, English, French, Spanish, or Arabic as well. And you are all very welcome to translate the petition in your own country's languages. You would need to enter your details, click Next, and then select the issues that matter to you. And such issues can be free and fair elections, human rights and the rule of law, gender equality, strong parliaments, freedom of expression, or active civil society. And then you would have signed the petition. Once you've done that, please share on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or whatever social network you are in. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, Madam Chairperson, for allowing us to present this petition.
Thank you, Zeina, for your very much detailed explanations on petition. And I believe that, of course, we will take your recommendations on board, and we will take all necessary steps in order to sign the petition. Now we move on to considering item 5 of our agenda. We are embarking on panel discussion marking the 5th anniversary of the Plan of Action for Gender-Sensitive Parliaments. Dear colleagues, I'm very happy once again to welcome you back at this panel discussion. As you know, gender equality in politics is at the heart of the agenda of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians and the IPU as a whole. The role of women parliamentarians is essential, is very much important, but we need that Parliament itself becomes a model of gender sensitivity. This way, Parliament can ensure gender equality and ensure rights of men and women, and you can ensure full contribution to its women members. Today, we mark 5 years of the adoption of the Plan of Action for Gender-Sensitive Parliaments. It was adopted and the IPU Assembly adopted this plan in Quebec City in Canada in 2012. The IPU defines gender-sensitive parliament as one that responds to the needs and interests of men and women in all its operations, in all its methods of work and functioning. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Spegenman to moderate the panel session. I would like Mr. Sven Spengemann to introduce the panelists and moderate this discussion. Mr. Spengemann, the floor is yours.
Merci. Madame la Présidente du Forum.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair of the Women's Parliamentary Forum. Chair, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to wish you a warm welcome to St. Petersburg, indeed a very special place where we are celebrating the 137th General Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentary Union.
I would like to begin with a word of thanks to our hosts, the Russian Federation, for their warm welcome and their excellent organization of this event. And I would also like to add a word of thanks to all the men in the audience this afternoon. This is work that cannot and should not be done by women alone. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce and moderate this panel this afternoon at the Forum of Women Parliamentarians. And the discussion is going to focus on the Plan of Action for Gender-Sensitive Parliaments that was adopted 5 years ago in my home country, Canada, on the occasion of the 127th Assembly in Quebec City. And this is a plan that was adopted unanimously by IPU member parliaments. It was the result of an inclusive consultative process, and that's why we have a consensual and comprehensive text that applies to all parliaments, regardless of the percentage of women members. And this plan of action is now an integral part of the core principles and objectives of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. It comes with the understanding that a genuine democracy can only be achieved if there's equal participation of women and men in decision-making, and if our institutions deliver equally to everyone. So what do we mean by a gender-sensitive parliament? The IPU defines gender-sensitive parliaments as parliaments that respond to the needs and interests of both women and men in its structures, operations, methods, and work. It's a parliament that embodies and advances gender equality at the same time. And there's 7 components of this plan of action. I will outline them briefly. The first one is to increase the number of women in parliament and to achieve equality in participation. The second is to strengthen gender equality legislation and policies. Thirdly, to mainstream gender equality throughout all parliamentary work. Fourth, institute or improve gender-sensitive infrastructure and parliamentary culture. Fifth, ensure that responsibility for gender equality is shared by all parliamentarians, women and men. Sixth, ensure that political parties are champions of gender equality. And lastly, to enhance gender equality, or gender sensitivity rather, and gender equality among parliamentary staff, and many of us have our parliamentary staff with us here. It's very important that it's not just us as parliamentarians, but the wider parliamentary community or family. So since October 2012, when this plan was adopted, there's been a lot happening in our parliaments to increase the level of gender sensitivity. The plan of action invites us to look within and to have a discussion, as we are here this afternoon, on how to improve. And by doing that, we are moving closer to Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which is to build institutions that are strong, effective, and representative. This agenda has also received top leadership support on the occasion of the Summit of Women Speakers of Parliament in Abu Dhabi in 2016. Through the Abu Dhabi Declaration, women speakers have committed to taking the lead in undertaking a self-assessment of the level of gender sensitivity of their parliament and leading reforms in this area. We are here to share these experiences and to draw lessons that can serve other parliaments so that we can build on the current momentum. And in order to structure the discussion this afternoon and to be as effective and efficient as we can be with the time that we have, I would ask you to be brief in your interventions, but also to consider structuring your intervention around one of three clusters. And these clusters are the following. In the first cluster, we ask questions relating to internal review. In other words, having a look at our parliaments at home and to see how we're doing. Questions in that category or cluster are, has your parliament carried out a gender audit? Or has your parliament taken measures to have women chairs of committees? The second cluster deals with mechanisms to work towards gender equality, and some of these mechanisms include the question of whether there are dedicated gender equality committees and whether women and men receive gender training in your parliament at home. And the last cluster relates to gender-sensitive policies and infrastructure. For example, does your parliament have a childcare centre? Does your parliament have anti-harassment policies? So again, when you bring forward your interventions, please try to structure them around those three clusters and indicate on the form that's available to you which one of the clusters you would like to intervene on. Colleagues, before I give you the floor and also say a few words about what's happened in my own parliament, I would like to introduce our distinguished panelists and invite them to share their experiences. Our first panelist is Ms. Maritza Espinales, who is the first Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of Nicaragua. And our second panelist is Speaker Jiku Luveni from the Parliament of Fiji. So let us start with Deputy Speaker Espinales. Your Parliament has been applying the IPU Gender Sensitive Parliaments Framework, and a review was done in 2014 from that perspective. And I'm wondering if you could share with the audience this afternoon a bit about the process and what has been achieved since then in your home Parliament.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the people and on behalf of the women of Nicaragua, I would like to express our gratitude for the human warmth extended to us by the Russian Federation. I would also like to greet all the women and men who are accompanying us along the way to greater freedom and equality. Our presentation will be describing the different areas of action. In the National Assembly of Nicaragua, we have made great progress in the legislative work as far as progress for women is concerned. Women in Nicaragua, under the Sandinista front, have conquered and reconquered the right to speak, the right to study, and the right to be the economic and social actors of their own life, in addition to political dialogue, all of which are indispensable for the harmony which we need so urgently. We have also seen a priority given to the rights of women and empowerment of women through many practices that are linked to gender equality, and this has allowed for full and active participation of women in many different areas, and in particular in those places where decisions are taken. It is here that we see the presence of greater equity and equality and empowerment of women, all of which have become an integral part of the legislative political agenda, and this in turn is clearly reflected in the 50% number of women that are elected to our national parliament. In the Bureau of the Parliament, we have 7 members, and 4 of them are women. and the total number of participation is 57.14%. In the parliamentary commissions, we have 15 different commissions. 8 of them are presided over by women. The vice chair of the commissions has 12 women chairing and 18 men chairing these same commissions, of which there are in total 30. We'd like to point out that in the action area conducted under the reform of our legislation, we have conducted reforms of our own country's constitution, declaring from our own Carta Magna that gender parity is constitutional, which now gives it constitutional weight and value in all of the positions that are subject to popular elections. And this has contributed to strengthening women's rights. We have also enacted and legislated family law in order to promote equality between women and men in terms of rights and obligations, and this goes horizontally through all of the institutions of the new family law legislation and all of the lawsuits pertaining to family law. This allows children, boys and girls, adults and people with handicaps. The law applies to them as well. I would like to underscore equal rights and opportunities law that has also been enacted in 2008. This law enacts equality and equity between women and men. And I'd also like to underscore the special law aimed at protecting families with pregnant women, and also laws that provide financial resources to biparental families, and laws that also provide special financing for multiple pregnancies or complicated pregnancies. We have thus declared also that there is a national week of breastfeeding in the workplace. We'd also underscore that as far as infrastructures and labor conditions are concerned, in the Parliament and the staff of our own National Assembly, we have also provided working conditions that take women into account. There, the Parliament, women are able to leave their children in child development centers so that they in turn can do their own work, and so the children at the same time can study. There is no technical gender unit in our Parliament as such. These issues are usually followed up by the Women's and Youth and Family Commission, which also addresses gender issues. But as I said, our Parliament does have a horizontal policy on gender issues, and this covers each and every one of our parliamentarians' responsibility, be they men or women. So it is a undertaken responsibility so that nobody has individual responsibility for it, because there is a central government commitment to continue building women's equality. On the subject of workers, and again, collective bargaining agreements that protect the workers themselves, there have also been special leave periods granted for those workers who have special family responsibilities. And for example, leave given for those who need to attend to family matters or to education without them losing any of their benefits or without their salary being reduced. So thus we see women and men workers receiving the required attention and seeing full respect for their rights. I would like to point out that this greater equality and progress in equality that we have seen in our country, Nicaragua, is primarily due to the political will of our president, Commander Daniel Ortega, and his companion, Mr. Sergio Murillo, who is in charge of social programs. Another point that I would underscore among the public policies of our government are those loan programs aimed particularly at women, financial loans that are primarily focused to the small and medium-sized companies and businesses. This means easier access to credit, technical assistance, and follow-up as well, so that any project undertaken by these women can reach all women and make them empowered from a financial standpoint and allow women to make their own decisions. As far as land ownership is concerned, our government's policy is to give land ownership titles to women, because there are social and economic analysis and studies that confirm that women tend to manage and administer land rights more effectively and are generally more able at managing the heritage process. So this shows that Nicaragua is well committed with its people in order to elevate Nicaragua to a level of human rights that shows equality and social justice, because indeed it is possible for us to build another world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam First Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of Nicaragua, Madam Espinales. Thank you for these very interesting and insightful examples. I'd like to now call upon Speaker Luveni of the Fijian Parliament. Welcome to our panel. Please tell us about the gender mainstreaming efforts that your parliament has undertaken.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, Excellencies, Honorable Speakers of Parliament, Members of Parliament, and ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, on behalf of the Fiji delegation, I would like to thank the Russian Federation for the very warm hospitality that has been extended to my delegation in attending this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, despite many years of global efforts to achieve gender equality, there has been no country in the world that can claim to be free of gender-based violence and discrimination. And my presentation will really focus on Parliament initiatives to address the issue. By background, the recent general election in Fiji, held in 2014, saw the highest number of women voted into Parliament at 18%. The leader of opposition is a woman. All women from the winning party were given ministerial portfolios. And with the support of the men, I was nominated the first woman speaker of Fiji, as proposed by the Prime Minister. Since then, there is an increasing number of male advocates speaking openly against gender-based violence and are recognized nationally for playing this role. The media coverage of this initiative has been very strong. At community level, gatekeepers committees, mostly headed by men, have been established as eyes and ears for incidences of violence. And it is mandatory by legislation that these are reported to the police immediately for immediate action to protect the victims. We recognize that Parliament must take special responsibility in its oversight role in the implementation of the SDGs, and SDG 5 has been prominent in our efforts. Initiatives that have been established and actioned by Parliament include the following. Firstly, we have established the Gender Parliament Group, and this group is made up of all the chairs and deputy chairs of all Parliament standing committees. This is to ensure that in the oversight role of all committees, they are looking at these bills through gender lenses. Second one is the Meet the Speaker program, and this enables the speaker, myself, a woman, an opportunity to make my presence felt by the population at grassroots level as well as at schools. The program takes Parliament to the people to increase awareness of the parliamentary process as well as encourage the population to engage in parliamentary activities and be comfortable engaging with parliamentarians who represent them. The program enables the speaker to convince the audience that women can take leadership positions and encourage the support of women in general elections. A popular speakers debate that focuses on the SDGs, which is conducted monthly, sometimes monthly. The very first speakers debate, we catered for 50 people, open invitation, and hopefully members of the public would attend. But when we had their debate, we had more than 300 people that attended, and all the speakers' debates since then have been catering for more than 500 people. A recent theme of the debate, which was, and I quote, "Is Fiji making progress in tackling violence against women and girls?" unquote. The panelists were gender balanced, including the relevant minister, the opposition shadow minister, and representatives from the civil society, the faith-based organization groups, the academia, and other relevant groups. This is the opportunity for the public to question the panelists on issues related to the topic. And as I mentioned, the topic here was on the tackling violence against women. We also have a parliament diary that has been produced, and it has included all the SDGs, including the SDG 5. And this is to remind members of parliament of the SDGs and also the targets that SDG aspires to achieve, and so that SDGs continue to be heard in parliamentary debates. Of course, SDG 5 is very prominent in these debates. A women's parliament was conducted to encourage women participation in national politics and parliament. This is a result of the last elections, when very few women were interested in standing for the elections. So we thought we'll give them some experience in the parliamentary process and debates in parliament so that they're comfortable and then come forward in the next general election. In this initiative, after 2 days of training, the 50 women from varying backgrounds undertook 2 days of training, culminating in a debate in Parliament that was aired live on TV. There have been other initiatives that Parliament aspires to conduct, and we needed technical assistance for. In this respect, we turned to the IPU for assistance. We thank IPU for providing technical assistance as follows. Firstly, the production of the gender toolkit for use by the parliamentarians, particularly the gender group that I alluded to earlier. This toolkit becomes their manual in their oversight role, not only in the committees, but also in Parliament. Secondly, the self-assessment toolkit. We have based our own toolkit, developed our own toolkit based on the IPU toolkit that has been distributed, and it addresses the SDGs. We also had the technical assistance from a consultant to help us in this self-assessment, in the use of the self-assessment toolkit, and to adapt it to our own situation. The conduct of Pacific regional seminars on human rights and democracy that's facilitated by IPU consultant. Of course, in an IPU activities, or in all IPU activities, the gender equality issue is always at the forefront. We are now planning to develop our baseline data on the SDGs, and IPU is also providing technical assistance on this. The Fiji Parliament is grateful to IPU for the support that is readily provided on our request. And with the technical assistance, we are committed to addressing the gender equality issue in Parliament. And with all the tools that is available for us, we are in for success and progress on these issues. Thank you, colleagues.
The interpreters would kindly request that speakers provide written copies of their statements for further speakers.
Also for your leadership. I'd like to take, with your indulgence, just a few moments to update you on some of the initiatives that we have undertaken at the parliamentary level in Canada. I will be brief, and I will invite my Canadian colleagues to elaborate in further discussion. In Canada, we currently have 139 women parliamentarians, 92 in the House of Commons and 47 in the Senate. Women occupy just over 27% of the seats in the House of Commons and nearly 45% of Senate seats. There are a number of measures that we've undertaken recently in the House of Commons, including the development of a code of conduct for members of the House of Commons that addresses issues including sexual harassment. The House of Commons has also tabled a report in June 2016, an interim report on moving toward a modern, efficient, inclusive and family-friendly parliament. Canada's House of Commons is committed to something called GBA+, Gender-Based Analysis Plus. This is an interesting tool that you will readily find on Google. The plus stands for intersectionalities. It's a policy training tool that looks at gender sensitivity issues related to the development and implementation of policy. And the plus stands for intersectionalities, in other words, particular vulnerabilities for Indigenous women or for women seniors. If you have any questions about this tool, you want to discuss it with any of us in the Canadian delegation over the days to come, please reach out to us. Our House of Commons also has a standing committee on the status of women, and we have put forward a number of initiatives, legislative initiatives recently on gender equality. I've had the privilege of bringing forward a private member's bill, Bill C-309 in the Canadian House of Commons, that would designate 1 week nationally each year to examine gender equality issues. I've had a chance to brief on that piece of legislation in New York at the 61st session of the Commission on the Status of Women. And we also have Bill C-16, which is an amendment to the Canadian Human Rights Act that includes gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination. Finally, we are strong champions of the He for She campaign. I know our colleague from Thailand, who's in the room with us, pointed this out earlier in discussion. Our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, is the He for She ambassador in Canada. He's the proud member of Parliament for the riding of Papineau. And all of you who would want to make progress on gender equality, I would encourage you to reach out to He for She in New York. They have a great program that you can take advantage of to raise awareness in your home parliaments. And also Equal Voice. So in March of this year, we had 338 young women in our House of Commons between the ages of 18 and 23. They took part in a mock session, an event that was organized by Equal Voice, and for the first time in history, women filled every seat in our House of Commons. It was quite a spectacular afternoon, and I would encourage you to develop initiatives that would follow suit. What I'd like to do now is turn to you, to the floor, to have our discussion. And I've got a list of countries that have requested to speak. I will read this list, also with the announcement that the list is now closed, because it will take us right till 4 o'clock to get through these comments. Please try to confine your comments to about 2 minutes per delegation, and let us know how you zoom in on the 3 clusters that are on the screen to structure our discussion and have a bit of interaction among ourselves. So the list of countries is the following. I've got the Philippines, China, Canada, Ecuador, Serbia, Bangladesh, Malaysia, India, Iran, Thailand, South Africa, Portugal, LAO People's Democratic Republic, Bolivia, and Malawi. And we have closed that list, and we will go in that sequence. I'm sorry, one addition, Kuwait as the last member in that list. It is now closed. We will go in the sequence in which we received requests, and we will begin with comments from the Philippines. The delegation from the Philippines, please. The floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Pia Cayetano. I'm Deputy Speaker in the House of Representatives in the Philippines. I was in Quebec in 2012, and I welcome this review after 5 years on the Plan of Action for Gender-Sensitive Parliament. I'd like to stress that where I came from as a member of the Senate, I finished 2 terms, which is equivalent to 12 years in the Senate, is what we did was we conducted a review of existing laws that were discriminatory towards women. We tried to institutionalize this so that the work of Parliament would always have this in consideration. And then what we also did was we included a gender perspective in the laws that we were reviewing, so that in every debate that we would have, the objective really was also to have a gender perspective. Interestingly, shortly after 2012 also, we passed our reproductive health law, which had been lingering for 12 years, 13 years in Parliament. But after it passed, it was held up in the Supreme Court. We now have a President, Rodrigo Duterte, who is very positive about reproductive health, and under his leadership, we are hoping that this law that took so long to pass would finally be implemented. And he has instructed our government agencies to push forward with this. But these are the kind of problems we continue to face in Parliament. Interestingly also, we passed a breastfeeding law, and then what we've tried to do is, well, the objective is to have it implemented in all agencies of government and private institutions. And we also opened we have had daycare centers for a long time, so what is new to us is a breastfeeding room where women can, it's a lactation room where women can either bring their babies or express their milk. It is very active in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, which is much bigger. I'm trying to open a new one. Finally, I'd like to add that in the Philippines, there is no restriction or there is no impediment to women being members of parliament. We have never adopted a quota system. Political parties at times have about 50% women candidates, so we have not really felt that need, but definitely we still need to encourage young girls to step up so that work in parliament is something that they consider accessible and a possibility for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments, and thank you for staying well within the time limit. I would like to call on the delegation for China to speak next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a very important subject for me. The Parliament, the legislative branch, has a very important role to play in promoting gender equality, and that's true for parliaments all around the world, because that will enable us to raise the profile of women. China attaches considerable importance to gender equality. In China, we tend to say that women are vital if you want to ensure a successful project. And the Constitution, enshrined in our Constitution, is the principle of women enjoying the same rights as men. And that goes for political, social, economic, and cultural rights. In 1992, we adopted the law on protecting the rights and interests of women, which guarantees the rights and interests of women in terms of social, political rights, right to employment, property rights, marriage rights. We've adopted 20 or so laws to promote marital rights, the fight against domestic violence, creating employment for women. All of these laws contain specific provisions promoting the rights of women. Over the past few years, women's issues have seen considerable progress. Just over the past few years, women's issues globally have seen great progress. But nonetheless, there are great inequalities between men and women from one country to another and one region to another. The situation is very different. And very often, women suffer. The contribution of women isn't recognized enough by societies in some parts of the world. More than half of the 800 million poor people in the world are women, and women are often the principal victims of war, terrorism, and violence wherever they occur. Protecting the rights and interests of women, promoting gender equality are key responsibilities for parliaments. And as parliamentarians, we should be promoting gender equality in the way in which we draft and adopt laws, the way in which we conduct the monitoring of implementation of laws. We need to ensure gender sensitiveness in the way in which we go about our work, encouraging gender mainstreaming in the development of laws. We need to include the principle of gender equality in decision-making processes, ensure that this is a priority in the legislative branch's work. We also need to take steps, effective steps, to promote gender equality. We also attach considerable importance to the presence of women when considering and drafting laws. Thank you.
For delegation of China, I would just like to remind people, in light of the length of the list, please try to confine yourself to the time limit of 2 minutes. I would next like to call on my colleague from Canada for her remarks.
Thank you very much. I'm Pam DeMoff. I'm the Member of Parliament for Oakville North Burlington in Canada, and it's a pleasure to be here at the IPU. As the Chair mentioned, we have 27% of elected women in our last election in 2015, but our Prime Minister did appoint a gender-balanced cabinet, which is fantastic that we have an equal representation of women and men in our cabinet. However, that means there are fewer women elected to Parliament who are available to sit and chair committees. So while we do have 30% of women on 3 of our committees, the rest of them do not have that many, and in fact, for many women it means that we have to sit on 2 committees, while many of our male colleagues only sit on 1. I'm also very proud of the fact that we passed Bill C-309, which created a Gender Equality Week in Canada, something that I was very proud to be a seconder of. We also, in March, had 338 young women from across Canada take their seats in our Parliament. It was called Daughters of the Vote, organized by Equal Voice. And on International Women's Day 2016, these women from across Canada took their place in the House of Commons and had a day in Parliament. We have a code of conduct for members of Parliament dealing with sexual harassment. Every elected member has to sign that document, and it provides procedures and policies for the confidential reporting, mediation, and resolution of sexual harassment between members of Parliament. It was an important document to create and have in place. However, there are certainly situations where members may be hesitant to come forward to report, even though we do have the document in place. But it is an important document for us to have. The other thing that we have implemented at our Parliament is a daycare. We've had that for several decades, actually, as well as short-term childcare. The issue, however, is that childcare is not available for the hours that parliamentarians work. So while there is childcare available, it's not necessarily conducive to a parliamentarian's lifestyle. There's also a room for mums or dads to take a small child for feeding. There's a high chair, a playpen, so that when the House is sitting, if they have their child with them, there is an opportunity to take their child. So we have made a lot of, we do have a number of gender-sensitive policies in place in Canada, and we are very proud of the work that we're doing. However, like any other country, there's always more that we can do, and we need to work towards getting more women elected to Parliament so that we actually get 50% of elected representatives, not just in Cabinet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those comments and for the point that the work continues. There's always more to be done. I would like to call on the delegation of Ecuador for their comments next, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you, I'd like to extend our thanks to the people of the Russian Federation for the very warm welcome that they've given us here in this beautiful country. I'd like to talk a little bit about what happens in our country, in Ecuador, and to say that the state of Ecuador has always been very sensitive to gender issues. The adoption of the Constitution in 2008 was an important step because it made considerable progress in terms of promoting women's rights. I could also talk about progress in the recognition of domestic work, which has been unprecedented in recognizing rights to sexual and reproductive health, for example, to women's participation, and indeed we've achieved many other things as well. Specifically, though, with regard to the Parliament's work, we have been adopting a number of laws, including laws that have allowed political parties to come forward with 50-50 parity, both horizontally and vertically, in terms of the presentation of their lists to elections. So we have about 43% to 48% participation of women in the parliament. We also have a speaker who's a woman. We have two vice speakers as well, deputy speakers who are women as well. We have excellent representation of women in the new parliament and in the board of officers. The Assembly has also made considerable steps forward in legislative harmonization, where we ensure that our laws promote gender balance and respect women's rights. It's also very important to say that the aim isn't just to achieve equality, but to ensure that women have their own spaces as well, and to ensure that there is capacity building, that women are protected from violence in the political environment. And there the National Assembly is now considering a new law against violence against women. And there's a specific chapter on political violence suffered by women. It's also important to mention that we're going to adopt new laws on other types of violence. There is, of course, physical, psychological, and sexual violence. But we're also going to be talking about economic and symbolic forms of violence. These are the objectives that we've set ourselves from now to November. And what we can say is that clearly we need greater awareness among political parties if we are to ensure more women on our electoral lists and better representation in parliaments. That's the direction we're headed in. But regrettably, there are 4 times more women at the head of electoral lists in Ecuador. So we have a long way to go. I do think we've made considerable progress. We're going in the right direction, but we still have progress to make. And in our experience, we can say that over the past 10 years or so, we've achieved more than what was achieved in over the previous 100 years in Ecuador. Thank you.
Comments and insights. Just one more time, please, for the benefit of the countries that remain on the list. We need to confine our interventions to about 2 minutes, otherwise we will not get through the people that wish to speak. I would like to call on the delegation of Serbia to speak next, please.
Honorable Chair, the equality principle is one of the founding values of the Republic of Serbia, and Constitution allows that gender equality and equal opportunities for men and women are respected. Key legislation in this respect are the laws on gender equality and anti-discrimination and amendments to criminal labor and family legislation. The National Strategy for Gender Equality for the period 2016-2020 has also been adopted. In this document, the principle of gender-responsive budgeting is implemented for the first time in Serbia. And this is still rare in legislation of most countries. Dear colleagues, this legal framework is effectively implemented, and this is very visible in Serbia. For example, the head of our government is a woman. The president of the Constitutional Court is a woman, as well the governor of the National Bank. And as you can see, the Speaker of the Serbian Parliament is also a woman. In fact, the only highest official in the Republic of Serbia who is not a woman is the President of the Republic of Serbia. Esteemed colleagues, there are 90 women MPs in the National Assembly out of 250 MPs, thanking to the electoral laws of Serbia. You can understand that the progress we made if I tell you that in 2000 were only 20 women in Parliament. Also, the Women's Parliamentary Network has been very active in our Parliament since 2013. All women MPs are members of this network regardless of their political party, and these networks are active also in the regional and the local parliamentary level. As you may see, the Republic of Serbia has many reasons to be proud of the progress it has made for the 5 past years. Women of Serbia become more visible, equal, and represented in all segments of our society. However, we cannot be satisfied with what we have achieved and stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those comments. Next on the list is the delegation of Bangladesh.
Hello. Hello everyone. This is Sabina Akhtar Tuhin, MP from Bangladesh. I am really overwhelmed to attend this 137th IPU summit here in St. Petersburg, Russia. To me, IPU is the heart of parliamentarians around the world. I am here to say something about the women parliamentarians. First of all, I'd like to tell you everyone, I am from such a country where the Speaker of Bangladesh, she is the woman, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Leader of the Parliament, the Opposition Leader, all are women. Our Awami League government is the role model of the world in empowering women. The Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina said, development is not possible to leave a group behind. She gives us a lot of encouragement to move forward. Women perform better responsibilities than men, but still the parliamentary women in the world are insufficient. I think it is important to increase the number of women parliamentarians in the world. Many women parliamentarians of many countries are harassed in many ways. All of us have to work together to stop it. Our country women's leadership everywhere, including local governments, has been ensured. The employment of women under public and government sector has increased. Our government has given girls the opportunity to get free education, so the rate of education is equal to the boy and girl. I am finally saying that women will take the country forward and improve the development, ending with the hope that the equal rights of men and women in the whole world will be settled. Thank you for me the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you so much for those comments from the delegation of Bangladesh. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Wabarakatuh, and a good afternoon. Honorable Secretary, Honorable Chairperson, esteemed delegates, I am the representative from the constituency of Kuala Kangsar of Malaysia, a country that believes in the participation of women taking central roles in governance ever since independence. Women constitute half of registered voters and every level of governance, may it be ministers at federal level, speakers at legislative, state legislature, and to village heads, has women participation. Women participation in the public sector as decision makers has exceeded 30%. The national policy on women accords women equality status and rights as enshrined in the Constitution. Women candidates in the 12th general election rose from 220 to 168 in the 13th general election, a 14% increase. In Malaysian Parliament, we have two programs, namely called Mantap and Perdana Fellows. We have two programs that allows young graduates who aspires to learn about legislating and work of and duties of parliamentarians. Both male and female graduates are trained. Under the 11th Malaysian Plan 2016 to 2020, the main program for women as decision makers has been addressed in Parliament and are aggressively undertaken, and they are as follows: increase in women participation at all levels 2020, create a more conducive working environment in order to encourage women to participate at decision-making levels, return to work program or career comeback program in order to increase the female participation to 59% by 2020, and an aggressive and realistic women directors program. In Malaysia, the use of social media is a powerful vehicle for drawing success and capabilities of women. Malaysia believes there is a need to improve media training for women parliamentarians and women candidates in elections vying for seats in parliament. If women parliamentarians are empowered to be the provider of first information and first ideas and first innovations, this shall raise interest in politics among young women and therefore provide a pool of new talents to become candidates for future representations and initiations, and applications of legislations of abuse amongst women parliamentarians can be effected successfully. Women parliamentarians should not be stereotyped to ministries that only involve women issues or gender stereotyping ministries. A broad ban of ministries should be open to all women parliamentarians, whether it be economics or scientific fields. And lastly, women parliamentarians of Malaysia should pushes the government to incorporate the agenda of sustainable development goals in national and local strategies, budgets, plans, and strengthen their data system. This requires making vigorous efforts to reach out all national stakeholders. And lastly, it is crucial for all members, all parliamentarians, women parliamentarians, to identify obstacles and bottlenecks standing in the way of these goals and targets. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution to the debate. Next, I would like to call on the delegation of India, please, for your intervention.
Interpreters would welcome written statements provided for proper translation. Thank you.
Mic is. Good afternoon, Chairperson, all dignitaries. My name is Raksha from India, Member of Parliament in Lok Sabha. The institution that should lead the way of gender equality in politics is the Parliament. Therefore, a gender-sensitive Parliament remains our firm agenda. Today, we are happy to mark the 5th anniversary of the Plan of Action for the Gender-Sensitive Parliaments. The quantum of women representation in my Parliament has had record increase in last 2 years Lok Sabha, with the current 64 women member as the highest in its history. We are working on improving the number of women representation through legislation reserving 1/3 seats in Parliament as well as the state legislature. For this beginning, a legislation as a bill was passed in one house but not in other house. We are still hopeful that we will be able to involve greater consensus among the party to overcome the opposition to such a bill. Most of the Indian states have now elected their own legislation, providing the 50% reservation of seats in such elected bodies as a national legislation for 50% is being considered. I am happy to say that today the visibility of women member in our political system has gone far beyond symbolism and will have great impact on the issue of the gender equality in time to come. In our Parliament, the second time women speaker has elected for the Lok Sabha, and currently the 6 women MPs serve as a cabinet minister and other 3 as minister of the lower rank. We have joint parliamentary committee of women empowerment, which examine all proposed legislation for the gender perspective and scrutinize the measures taken by the government to secure equality and the dignity for the women in all areas. I being the one member of the committee. We have been undertaken exercise on the regular basis to identify the measures towards creating gender sensitivity parliamentary culture and infrastructure. Measures have been adopted to provide for the specific need of the women members, such as the provision of the ladies' lounge in the central hall, convenient sitting hours of the houses to meet their social and the family responsibilities. Gynecological facility in the parliament premises, the lady attendant in the Lok Sabha chamber to take care of the needs of the lady member in the house, etc., etc. Transport facility during the late working hours and the provincial quota in allotment of the residential accommodation are the same others. Sexual harassment at the workplace is the serious offense in the law and complaints. The committee took into all complaints of the sexual harassment. I'm glad to make this submission on an occasion making the 5th anniversary of Plan of Action for the Gender Sensitivity Parliaments adopted by IPU. Thank you.
Gentlemen, if we can keep the 2 minutes time limit in mind to make sure we can get through the list. Next, I would like to call on the delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Interpreters would welcome written statements for proper translation. Thank you.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ms. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to represent the women parliamentarians of the Islamic Parliament of Iran. Since the subject of the forum at this stage is adoption of the action plan of gender-sensitive parliaments, I would like to address our experiences. In the first action area, that is to increase the number of women in parliament and achieve equality in participation, we're working on an active plan that enhances the women parliamentarian taking part in the parliament as member parliaments. I should also note that, meanwhile, efforts and contributions of the parties, the political parties, to allocate a 30% quota to women candidates are also noteworthy, which has included in doubling the number of women parliamentarian members. In the second area, I would like to mention that since for the first time the number of women MPs have doubled to 17 members, we have accomplished to elevate women MPs' participation in the parliament. We have achieved to approve a very effective law in the 5th year development plan that states government is to monitor the plan making, decision making, and policy making in every single ministry and organization to be according gender justice indexes. Around the third action area, that is to mainstream gender equality throughout all parliamentary work, we have been working on an act that allows a family committee to be established to make sure mainstreaming gender equality happens to take place through all the acts and plans that are approved in the parliament. About the fourth and the fifth action area, to institute or improve gender-sensitive infrastructures and parliamentary culture, we have held sessions on this issue and raised the matter with the Speaker of the Islamic Parliament and other members, and we have achieved in this area. I'm proud to announce that now, for the first time, we have made sure to participate in most of the important committees. For instance, we have 3 women MPs in the Economic Committee for the first time. Also, a women MP in the dominant Budgeting Joint Committee Bureau. Another first is a woman MP as a chairperson of a committee. I must emphasize also, 35% of the committee bureau seats are taken by the women MPs, who are only 6% of our parliament. We are working side by side and hand in hand to vanish gender inequalities, and we believe that women's higher participation needs the talk to be walked. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those important comments. I would next like to call on the delegation of Thailand for your intervention, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and dear all distinguished delegates. For Thailand, we still have been room of improvement in terms of gender sensitivity parliament. However, allow me to share some noteworthy progress on this. What Thailand has done to promote gender equality, especially in the parliament, has started from the upstream of the process on general election. The new constitution has guaranteed gender equality between men and women from preparing a list of candidates from members of the House of Representatives, which will be submitted by a political party. Furthermore, under provision in the Constitution, it is clearly stipulated that the state shall take into account different necessities and needs with respect to genders, age, and condition of person to ensure fairness. This will directly result in the budget allocation of Parliament. In addition, Thailand also has Gender Equality Act. Under this law, there is a mechanism for anyone to claim for compensation under the ground of discrimination. In terms of financial support, Thailand also has what we call Women Development Funds. This fund aims to provide financial support to women through loan and also free grant for women development. In addition, Women Affairs Subcommittee in the Parliament believes that if we fail to decrease violence against women, it would be difficult to enhance women empowerment. Therefore, we have attempting to spread the message against domestic violence by doing activities outside the Parliament, especially in school and university. In order to ensure that the message of the campaign to end violence against women and child would be heard throughout the year, the Subcommittee on Women has launched the program what we call the New Gen Say No to Violence, which aim to promote more involvement of school and university students in combating violence against women. Last but not least, the Subcommittee on Women also organized music video competition for a song named She. The aim of this competition is to promote the music video to the public. This music video surely inspire women as well as encourage the public to collaboratively join the campaign to protect women and children from violence in all forms. Thank you for all your participation.
Thank you so much to the delegation from Thailand. I would next like to call on our colleagues from South Africa for their contribution.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Doris Lagute from South Africa. Our parliament is made of two houses, the National Council of Provinces and the National Assembly, which are both led by women. We have 53 committees in our parliament, of which 26 are led by female chairpersons. We also have 42% of women representation in our cabinet. Also, our administration in our parliament is being led by a female, a strong female deputy secretary to parliament, and most of the units in our parliament are headed by female managers. As South African Parliament, we also have two dedicated committees which focus on the advancement and emancipation of women, both in our parliament and our society as well. In August this year, we hosted our SADC International Women Parliament in order to advance and also share our best practices with each other in our parliament. So the issue of gender equality is very important to us as South Africans, and we aspire to reach the SADC protocol of 50-50 gender equality, and also as per our National Development Plan of 2030. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for staying well within the time limit of 2 minutes. I next call on our friends from the delegation of Portugal for your contribution.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, moderator, dear colleagues. Reading this action plan approved in Quebec in 2012, by rereading it, I think it's very actual, very present, and most of the countries have not implemented it in most of its orientations. Well, in Portugal, we started 2015, we came into the group of 30% plus, 34% of women parliamentarians, and objective is parity, and I must be speaking about what we have not succeeded to do. So about the questions that have been asked. Concerning the first, we have a quota for the elections for the parliament and municipalities since 2006. This law imposes a minimum of 33% of the women in the lists. And we have a subcommission for gender equality in the parliament. And we also have a kindergarten for the last 14 years, actually, where we welcome children and grandchildren of parliamentarians. But the Portuguese parliament is far from having achieved this balance, gender balance. In certain commissions or committees, we don't see many women. I'm speaking here about defense, justice, and internal affairs, and even the economy. My colleague here to my side is vice president of Economy Committee, or the Committee for Economy, is the only woman present. And in other committees, namely education and health, the majority of parliamentarians are women. So there are still areas of the parliament work where there's no gender balance, and we should promote that. And in terms of delegations to go abroad, women represent here 43% of our delegation. But we have a parliamentarian delegation for the Assembly of NATO, which has no women present. So although, or despite all what we have done, the Portuguese Parliament still needs to do better to progress. And I like to ask you all a question. I'd like to know if the IPU itself has ever promoted an evaluation, assessment of its own plan of action that was approved in 2012. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next, I call on the Lao People's Democratic Republic. You have the floor for 2 minutes. The delegation from the Lao People's Democratic Republic be present.
Mr. Chairperson, honorable delegates, it's my great pleasure and honor for me then to share on behalf of the Lao People's Democratic Republic on the enhancing the gender sensitivity and ability to deliver all the gender equality in terms of the commitment of the plan of action for gender-sensitive parliaments. As you have been informed and aware that the gender equality is at the heart of democracy, peace and sustainable development, gender sensitivity needs to be at the forefront of our collective engagement for equality. In March 2016, the National Assembly Lao PDR held a new election with the representation of 41 females, parliamentarian, 27.5% female, which subsequently approved the new government. The government of the Lao PDR has pursued the national policy and mainstreaming the SDG 5 gender equality by promoting the role of the women in all spheres for the contribution of the socio-economic development. And in terms of the commitment in the parliament, the Women Parliamentarian Caucus was established in 2005 and has the mandate to perform 4 main roles: oversight, legislation, representation, and decision. Besides, the Women Parliamentarian Caucus has to strengthen the capacity of female parliamentarians in order to monitor the government in the implementation of the socio-economic policies and the plans passed by the National Assembly, and to monitor the law passed at the National Assembly. The Women Caucus has designed the work plan to improve the gender mainstreaming strategy and also to monitor the mainstreaming in different organizations. And also the representation of women in the parliament, and also that, but there isn't, the representation in the parliament has steadily increased, but there isn't a lot then to be done in order to sensitize the public awareness on gender-sensitive capability. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your contribution to the discussion. I now call on the delegation of Bolivia. You have the floor for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon to everybody present, and very special and warm greetings to the Russian people who have welcomed us here these next few days. We, of course, would like to address the issue of gender and speak about women, and I think that we should not just focus on the subject for 3 or 4 days, because it is fundamentally important that all of us speak about women. It is an all too brief moment for us to address such a sensitive, such a human subject, since women are the fundamental pillar of society. Without women, basically, there would be no complementarity. And in my own country, in Bolivia, we are now living in a paritary democracy. We have a political constitution that was enacted in February of 2009. And in that constitution, we see that the government has adopted a participative and representative and community form of democracy with equivalent conditions between women and men. Within this framework in Bolivia, we see participation of women in all activities and in all decision-making processes. In the past, I'd say between 2005 or 2006, we had neoliberal governments and women had no participation or inclusion, whereas now with the central government of President Evo Morales, we see clear participation of women both in the Legislative Assembly, where we have 51% women, and we also have an alternance and parity law, as well as a electoral regime law, which is Electoral Law 026. In the elections of the year 2014, what did this electoral law require? Well, what it required was that when the first titular candidate is a woman, the alternate for that woman should be a man. And thus we have what we call complementation. And if the titular is a man, of course, the alternate will be a woman. So this shows that in Bolivia, we are breathing, and we can see that there's an air of equality and of complementarity between women and men. So, of course, it is important that the Bolivian state also ensure that women have access to technical, humanistic training, both for women and men, and in particular training related to life, to work, productive development, and access to the new information technologies. In the past, we women did not have the right to speak into a microphone, for example, whereas at present today, women are no longer discriminated against. So in recent times, we have seen change, and we see that now we live in an inclusive system where women are due full respect and respected. Thank you.
So much. Our second last speaker is a member of the delegation of Malawi.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. My name is Mary Navicha, Member of Parliament from Malawi. In Malawi, out of 193 members of Parliament, 32 only are women. In the speakership, we have the first Deputy Speaker, who is a woman, out of 3 speakers. Where we are not doing well is on chairing of the parliamentary committees. Only 1 committee out of 14 is chaired by a woman. On parliamentary staff, since 2005 to date, the Secretary General and Clerk of Parliament is a woman. In addition, recently, the Parliament has recruited more than 8 committee clerks, out of which 5 are women. Challenges facing by women in Malawi: 1, lack of resources to effectively compete with our male colleagues. And it's not easy for a Malawian woman to make it into Parliament. 2, electoral laws which are out of sync with the current world order on democratic representation. 3, cultural beliefs which look down upon women as capable of taking leadership positions. So far, we have put in place the following measures. One, a thorough review of a current electoral law with a view to enhancing women's political participation. Secondly, engaging various stakeholders to support women and to build their leadership capacity. Third, learning from other countries within the region who have had best practices in ensuring gender equality. And the last one, our President, Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika, is also championing a 50-50 campaign. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much for your comments. And the final intervention this afternoon is from our colleagues, the delegation of Kuwait.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, your esteemed delegates. And I would like to stand, because standing is reaching out with a message. What are we doing here? Are we talking about equality of chances? I'm a real-life example. I'm the only female MP in our parliament. And we don't lack skills, and we don't lack training, and we don't lack qualities. What made us lose? The same question goes to you, all of you sitting in this hall. What made us lose? Not to have enough female MPs in our parliaments, of which we all know that when we have more female MPs in our parliaments, the world will be a better place. What did we do that we lack the skill? It's not the training, because women are known for being super powerful and multitaskers and great thinkers. And if you look at any constitution in the whole world, it stipulates citizen. It never said or stipulated a gender. The constitutions never said the constitution or the citizen is a male or citizen is a female, because the brain and the perseverance has no gender. It has no sex, neither male or female. It's you. So, what is our solution? Education, ladies and gentlemen. It's our cultures that made women inferior. It's education. The more you inject more power in education, we will reach a point where we will have equality. I have noticed when I talk, I will finish, thank you so much. I have noticed when we were talking, yes, we pay attention, but at the end of the day, it's the same agenda over and over. Let's talk about real facts. Education. If we can build that, we can build generational change. Generational change is a must. Thank you.
Thank you so much for ending us on such a high note. Madam President of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians, dear colleagues, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to have served as your moderator. I would like to thank our distinguished panelists and all of you for the wealth of best practices we heard this afternoon. I'm sure that this is going to be a source of inspiration that will give us new impetus as we work towards making our parliaments fully gender sensitive. It's a continuous process. It's a work in progress. We should all feel responsible in making our parliaments a model of gender sensitivity to society at large. I'd like to wish you excellent deliberations during the IPU's 137th Assembly here in St. Petersburg. With my thanks, have an excellent afternoon, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Spengman. Thank you to all the speakers. I would like to thank all the participants in this panel discussion for this very interesting debate. And before we move on to the next item on our agenda, let me remind you once again that all the participants in the forum are invited to attend a reception for the women parliamentarians. It will take place tomorrow on October 15th at 8 p.m. at the Marble Palace. Those of you who have not received the invitations yet can receive the invitation after the forum right here in this room from the IPU Secretariat. We are looking forward to seeing you at the reception. And distinguished colleagues, let's move on to another very important item on our agenda. So we will have a hearing with the candidates for the post of IPU President. So distinguished colleagues, as you know, here in St. Petersburg, the Governing Council will elect a new president of the IPU for a next 3-year term. The election will take place at the last sitting of the Governing Council. Over the past 20 years, prominent members of parliament from countries from various regions served as presidents of the IPU. Historically, IPU presidents were outstanding political leaders who were respected nationally and internationally, firmly committed to the core values and principles of the IPU. In particular, they were advocates of democracy, human rights, gender equality, and the rule of law. They were also called upon to invest significant time and energy in carrying out their functions as IPU president. As a gender-sensitive organization, IPU attaches great importance to gender equality and the political empowerment of women at all levels. And I am pleased that 2 candidates for the office of the IPU presidents are both women. So we have the candidature of Ms. Gabriela Cuevas Barron from Mexico and Ms. Yvonne Pasada from Uruguay. And their candidatures and CVs can be found in your documents. They are invited to attend this forum and this hearing to present themselves and introduce themselves and answer our questions. I will briefly introduce the 2 candidates before we hear their statements, and after that you will be able to ask questions to each of the candidates. So the representatives of the Bureau of our forum tell me that only the Bureau will have time to ask questions, unfortunately. So, colleagues, we first call Ms. Gabriela Cuevas Barron. She comes first in the alphabetical order. So I invite Ms. Cuevas Barron. Welcome, Ms. Cuevas Barron. You are a senator for the Mexican Senate since September 1st, 2012. and you are the chairperson of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate of Mexico within the IPU. You are head of the delegation of the Mexican Congress from 2014 to 2016. You served as a member of the committee to promote respect for international humanitarian law, which you chaired from 2014 to 2015. And you are currently the internal auditor for the year 2017. So, Ms. Cuevas Baron, you have the floor for your 5-minute statement.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you very much, dear colleagues. I feel really happy to be here in front of you, proud of being a Mexican. In Mexico, we achieved one of the most important goals that we can have in gender and in politics in a Congress. We finally achieved a constitutional reform in order to have parity at the Mexican Congress. Now that more than 40% of women parliamentarians, both the Senate and the House, are women. That's why I'm here, because we believe in gender parity. We believe in opportunities. We believe in increasing and capacity building. We believe that we need an opportunity to change our communities, our countries, and of course, to change the world. Allow me to address this speech in Spanish, my language.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for this very valuable opportunity. The subject of gender has a very valuable aspect, which is the issue of inclusion. It is not just a matter of speaking about being a woman and being able to access different opportunities. What we're speaking about here is an historical debt. We are speaking about how we women must be part and parcel of decisions that are made because we are part of the planet itself. And also because over the past few years or even the past few centuries, we have been the vulnerable population, the population where poverty was present, where there was an educational deficit, and where in many cases women have not had access or rights to hold property. So obviously, education is an indispensable component if we want to achieve a more just and a more inclusive world and achieve a world where there is true dialogue as well as peace. Here today we have a valuable opportunity, a very valuable opportunity, because it's the first opportunity where the Inter-Parliamentary Union must take a decision in order to provide its own presidency with a woman president. It's the first time that we are absolutely sure that the IPU will have a woman as its president, which is a very important step and a very important occasion for this organization. Let me say that we need to invest more and more into our organization. First of all, in order to make it more efficient and more transparent organization, and of course a more inclusive inter-parliamentary union. In order to achieve this, I am suggesting, just like we have English and French as official languages, that we also include Spanish and Portuguese and Arabic as official languages of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. The agenda of our organization is very important. First, for the organization itself, of course, we need to ensure that we generate all the necessary and relevant opportunities, as well as the equity, in order to have the same weight and decision-making ability for women and men, and so that all of us can access the same jobs and positions. But there where we need to put the emphasis is in the area of protecting the human rights of parliamentaries, and more specifically, the human rights of women parliamentarians. This also applies to the congresses of different countries, because in these different countries, we see issues of discrimination against ourselves, the women. And here is where, with your help, I want to act as president of the IPU to defend our rights as women and the rights of every woman whose rights may have been trodden upon in different countries or in different parliaments. Today we are faced with major challenges in our agenda, and the issue of gender equality also has to be brought into peacekeeping operations and all those operations aimed at building greater opportunities and better institutions for women. And here is where the role of the Inter-Parliamentary Union is very important. It's important in the building of major worldwide agreements, such as, for example, the United Nations, as well as on the implementation side, a true implementation of public policies and of budget policies as well. We see a great degree of inequality in our countries. All of us come from different cultures, religions, different languages, but that which brings us together, many of us women here present today, has to do with achieving a more inclusive and just society for women, and that is why the agenda that I'm proposing is not just setting up gender balance quotas, for example, which I have mentioned as already implemented in Mexico and which are a source of pride, but rather the need for us to reach deeply into our societies to find true inclusion for women in our economy, in our financial systems, and in our jobs. We need to achieve that each and every woman on the planet is able to achieve the dreams that she has set out to accomplish. And this is the responsibility that is on our shoulders, because it depends on what we can achieve as parliamentarians. It depends on our ability to truly represent our societies. In my work plan, you will find 4 different strategic lines. First of all, the achievement of a more inclusive or more transparent organization, a more efficient and more communicative organization. Secondly, the Inter-Parliamentary Union is something that should work for us women and for us men parliamentarians. In other words, through programs of capacity building, of ongoing education, and programs that will in particular ensure that women are more competitive in electoral processes and help women use the social media for better communication and for exchanging amongst ourselves all the better practices in legislative areas and in the reality of millions of women and girls. Thirdly, the Inter-Parliamentary Union should have closer ties with the national parliament. It is fundamental that we have closer communication. It is fundamentally important that we understand that working together is what's going to make it possible for us to implement the Sustainable Development Agenda, and it's what's going to make it possible for millions of women and men to live in conditions of equality. The 4th element of the program is to achieve an Inter-Parliamentary Union that will truly be a worldwide actor and protagonist. Of course, we are observers at the United Nations, but we can no longer sit back as observers. We need to move into action. It is us, it is we, as those represented at the United Nations, that must ensure that the voices of millions of women and men who participate in this organization are heard at the United Nations. We will have a lot to say there next year on the Worldwide Pact on Migration and Refugee Populations. We also need to make it understood that we have a lot to say in the subject of development and implementation of development policies, and also the implementation of sustainable development policies, and of course climate change and how to take care of our planet. So what inspires my candidacy is also the defense of multilateralism, because it is in the field of multilateralism that we find a true opportunity for dialogue and an opportunity to build better societies and an opportunity so that someday in the future we can achieve peace throughout the entire planet. This is also where we find a place that governments are given today, and where our own voices as parliamentarians should be representative of the tremendous plurality of our societies. I'm a woman who started her political career when I was 15 years old. When I was 21 years old, I was elected as a member of parliament. I know what it's like to be a woman, and I know what it's like to be young at the same time. I know everything that this requires, and I know how tough it is to get the training and the adequate opportunities. We are here because there have been women who before us dedicated their entire lives to the cause of women. These women made it possible for us to vote and for us to get elected and for us to take the floor and to speak. So today we need to show gratitude to those women in the past, but the best way we can repay the debt to these women and to their memory is by setting out an open and brighter road for the generations of women who will follow us and who many of us have had the opportunity to lead. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Cuevas Barron, for your statement at the Forum of Women Parliamentarians. So, dear colleagues, I have to tell you that Ms. Cuevas Barron has to be present, and another sitting we will invite the other candidate, and after that Ms. Cuevas Barron will come back and both candidates will answer the questions after that. So I'm sorry, but we will have to adjust our program like this. So thank Ms. Cuevas Barron. We are waiting for your return here. Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, I invite to the podium Ms. Ivone Pasada from Uruguay. Dear colleagues, I would kindly ask the delegation of Ms. Barron stay outside this audience. It is just in line with our rules. Welcome, Ms. Pasada. You were elected to the House of Representatives of Uruguay in 2005 and re-elected for another term in 2010. Then you were elected the Speaker of the House, and you were the Speaker until 2011. In 2015, you were elected to the Uruguayan Senate and have since been Vice President of the Senate. In IPU, you were a member of the Executive Committee till October 2015. You are GRULAC President, and you've been GRULAC President since October 2016. You were elected IPU Vice President in 2012 and re-elected for the second term in 2013. You were also a member of the Subcommittee on Finance, a member of the Gender Partnership Group and the Bureau for Women Parliamentarians. Ms. Pasada, I would like to give the floor to you. You have 5 minutes for your statement. Excuse me, I can give you 8 minutes. Because our first statement continued for 8 minutes.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be able to speak to you today at this Women's Forum. The IPU has done so much for us. I want to say that I have a thorough understanding of the IPU because of the experience of being in the Executive Committee and being Vice President on 2 occasions. And together with you, I have learned how to respect differences, how to respect different cultures, how to respect each other's space. and how to pursue dialogue and peace. I think the IPU has this great opportunity now in having a woman as president that will bring greater balance, a different perspective. And if you'll allow me, if the men here will understand me, I want to say to my women colleagues now, we need empowerment. We need to promote gender balance, even more than we already have done. And we need to do that with men's support, so that this is a real commitment that works. We need to have political spaces to ensure that political parties not only put women on their lists, but put women in decision-making posts, which is where we deserve to be represented as much as men. I think the Inter-Parliamentary Union needs to continue to pursue this path which it's been pursuing for many years now, and trying to take a comprehensive view of world affairs, respecting the need to pursue peace and gender balance, respecting women, children, and the youth. I'd like to ask you for your support in this quest which I began a number of years ago, which I now wish to pursue as president of the IPU, in promoting this cause. We need to take firm decisions, and we need to ensure that we provide support for women to express themselves. So we need to stick together in this quest, and we know this very well here in the IPU. The IPU has been doing such a fine job. We meet once or twice a year at the Assembly, but as President, I would like to promote a political forum where it's the responsibility of the presidents and chairs to promote the common themes of interest to women. Very often, our governments don't come up with adequate solutions to conflicts. There are very few situations where women are in charge of dealing with conflicts. And we need to be in a position where we can help support peace. If women were in charge in this situation, then we could bring that balance that is required in our world, and I believe that we could bring peace. We have common values, we need to respect each other's differences, of course, but we need to promote this opportunity for political dialogue, which is what the IPU gives us, and we need to use that to pursue these objectives of peace. I'd like to finish by telling you that what I will bring is hard work, dedication, respect, and fundamentally, I will ensure that public expenditure is used wisely. And that is the money which is coming from our people, our citizens, and it needs to be spent widely, and that's an example that we need to set. So thank you very much for your attention. Of course, I'd be delighted to respond to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ivone Passada, and I invite you to take your seat next to us at the high table, and we will invite Ms. Cuevas Barron, and you both will take questions. Please proceed and join us here at the high table. Thank you.
One.
Hello.
Dear colleagues, now we have an opportunity as I have already said before, to ask questions to both candidates. And as far as I understand, the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians have already drafted these questions that will go to candidates. This is our new procedure, and we will give the floor to one candidate first and then to the second candidate, and they will answer the same question. Okay, distinguished colleagues, I will give the floor to Ms. Habibu from Nigeria, who will ask questions to our candidates.
Yes, okay. Quelles mesures avez-vous prises dans...
What have you done in your country to promote gender equality and women's empowerment? Thank you.
Благодарю вас за вопрос.
Thank you for your question, Ms. Habibo. And the question goes to Ms. Baron.
Much, Madam President. Well, as I mentioned during my speech, in Mexico, we're very proud of the constitutional reform we made to create parity in all the Mexican Congress. And that goes to the Senate, to the lower house, and of course to all the different representation seats. It goes to the states' parliaments. It goes also to the municipalities. Now we have achieved more than 40% of the seats in both houses for women. That's a good goal, and we are really proud about that. In the other side, the Mexican government, with the help, of course, of the lower house, they are responsible of budgets. They have created a very important strategy for the financial inclusion of women, and also to develop a very important network that will be used for women to have more opportunities. It's not useful even you have the better quota system for being in politics if you don't have, for example, a daycare system for children, or if you don't have schooling for all day, or if you don't have access to subsidies or to property rights. So in Mexico, we are assuring to have all this kind of network or ecosystem to define all the possibilities for all women.
Thank you, Ms. Cuvas Baron. And now the floor goes to Ms. Posada. Ms. Posada, please answer the same question.
Thank you. Well, we have been constantly trying to promote women's role in decision-making and put women on electoral lists. In the forthcoming elections that will be held in 2019, there is a proposal to ensure that there is parity on electoral lists, and indeed in the presidential contest. We have practically 100% coverage for sexual and reproductive health for women, and for the protection of young girls and adolescents. And we've had great success in that regard in the field of sexual and reproductive health. We also have policies for promoting equal pay, a number of laws and regulations in that regard. We see many women now in important decision-making positions, and that guarantees as well persons of African descent and women to try to promote those sectors of population so they get access to good jobs. We have a vice president as well, who is a woman in our country.
Thank you, Ms. Ivona Passada. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to give the opportunity to one of the members of our forum to ask the question. The representative of Egypt, Absel Marad, please ask the question from the Forum of Women Parliamentarians. Ms. Absel Malad from Egypt.
The IPU works to support and to enable and empower women on the international level. What are your plans in this regard?
The question goes to Ms. Baron, please. What is your answer?
Well, I think being a woman and a parliamentarian is a double commitment. Of course, being the IPU president is a representative of the most important parliamentary body on the planet, but it's also important to encourage the members to take action in these new policies, and in particular women. Firstly, within the organization, we need to start by implementing the gender-sensitive guide, and that's something that we already have in the IPU for parliaments, but it's important to lead the way and show the example. We also need to focus on the work of women parliamentarians. So we need to see capacity building, continued education, seminars and workshops. The world is changing, and we need to change too. We need to have the better tools in order to do our work more effectively. What's very important as well is protecting the rights of women parliamentarians. Whenever in their countries they may be threatened or even see human rights abuses. Of course, as a woman, we're not just here to defend their rights, but we need to understand women. It's a shared battle that we are in here. What's also important is the relation between the IPU and national parliaments. And there we're going to have to promote standards that achieve parity in the different parliaments in the world. In some places we've already achieved that. Finally, the relationship with the UN. We need to remember that next year, just as an example, we're looking at a global compact for migrants and refugees. And the gender perspective in all of the work of our organization must be taken into account. We need to look at the impact of migration on women and how women suffer considerably because of the discrimination that they face in their countries.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. And now I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Passada. Please answer the same question.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed. I think there are two vital issues, and if I was president of IPU, I would be trying to promote women's involvement in politics wherever they are. And that means not just a question of capacity building, training, which is of course necessary, but we need to have a comprehensive world view of this because of the differences that there are between the different geopolitical groups. And we need to see greater uniformity through working closely together. One of the proposals I have in my work plan is to set up an inter-parliamentarian political forum. And what that means is focusing on gender issues and ensuring that they are present. And gender issues must also be a matter for the permanent responsibility of our presidents and chairs in the global meetings that they go to, And what's important is that parliaments respect those commitments. There needs to be oversight, in particular with regard to gender issues. We need to be very closely ensuring our scrutiny and oversight role. And that's something that the IPU president has a very important role in. And indeed, all of the presidents of the different geopolitical groups need to be involved. And then we need to ensure that equal opportunities for women and men at the IPU. So that the figures on the page are translated into real achievements and progress for women's rights. Thank you.
И сейчас я предоставляю возможность задать три.
I'd like to ask somebody to ask questions on the third question, and I give the floor to representative of Thailand. Now the floor is yours. Please ask the third question that we prepared in the bureau.
Dear board candidate, to achieve on gender equality, we need support from men. Therefore, the question on this is, if you were elected, how will you engage men on gender equality?
Thank you for your question, and I ask Ms. Cuevas Baron to answer the question.
I believe that we have an excellent example here today, an example of men who want to support the gender issue. And when we speak about gender, we speak about inclusion, and we speak about fairer and a more equitable world where there's room for everybody and everybody has the same possibility of achieving their dreams. I am convinced that in the measure that we are able to develop greater awareness, in the measure we're able to explain the advantages of a more inclusive world, in particular as regards gender issues, and in particular also regarding many other things, that is where we see the agenda for social equality, educational equality, and of course equality and access to technologies. Everything that you see in the Sustainable Development Objectives, which are aimed at ensuring that nobody is left behind. Leaving nobody behind means that women and men need to work hand in hand in order to achieve this. So yes, there is a first moment where we do need to ensure that the job is done, because the inequality gap between women and men not just needs to be reduced, but it needs to reach an end. So of course we need to work with men to achieve these reforms, and then when women and men are working in equality and with the same capacity, then we need the capacities for all of us to increase for the good of the planet. Today we hear about the need for greater productivity, greater salaries, diminishing poverty and eradicating hunger. But this can only be achieved through having women and men working together by developing awareness. This is something we need to do every day, because that's what can cause social change, cultural change, and it's only through this that we can achieve the so much needed institutional change.
I now give the floor to Ms. Yvonne Pasada for her answer.
Muchas gracias. Es evidente que hoy en el mundo.
Thank you very much. It is very obvious that in the world, women are seeing a different type of participation other than in politics, and this participation also has to be encouraged because it has an impact on politics and on parliaments. I'm speaking about science, research, and technology. At present, we see women being able to participate in a different manner in what is the academic world and the world of the universities. And that is why, as we said at the beginning, that it is necessary to show political will within our own parliaments, but also within our own political parties. My own candidature has been approved by all of the political parties in my country, and I wish to inform you that I am here in St. Petersburg along with my delegation, but I am the only woman in my delegation, whereas everybody else in my delegation is a man. That also means that the work that we have been conducting in that regard shows us where we need to stand in order to achieve change. And we need to stand there where decisions are made, and that is, of course, in the political parties. So that's where we need to be. That is where we need to make the most of power in order to stand on an equal footing, and that is where our primary job needs to be done, at the level of strong political parties, because that is what brings strong democracies.
So, distinguished colleagues, we are lucky to be able to ask another 2 or 3 questions depending on our time, since our candidates have to speak at other committees as well. So please, who wants to ask a question? Indonesia, please go ahead. Could you present yourself and ask your question?
President. It's really appreciate to listen to 2 of the presentation of the 2 candidates. My question is, how would you see what's going on now with the refugee and humanitarian crisis in the world, not only in the part of the world, I mean that we all realize. And the most affected person, women and children. So what do you want to do when you are elected as the president of IPU, and how IPU can be solved the problem of humanitarian crisis as the representative of the people? Of course, we the parliamentarians have the mandate to make people peace and more prosperity to live in this world, regardless race, religion, and ethnicity. Thank you.
I thank you for your question. So, colleagues, before I ask our candidates to answer, I would like to say who has already inscribed to ask questions: Bangladesh, Bolivia, Iraq, and Zambia. We may be able to hear all the questions if you keep them really brief. Thank you for your understanding. So I would like to give the floor to Ms. Yvonne Pasada for her answer.
Muchas gracias. Sin lugar a duda,
Thank you very much. Very clearly, what our colleague has addressed is indeed a very serious and complex subject. And of course, a subject where we need to actually have a strong presence and a role. And having a role in these matters means being on the spot, being in the territory. And that in turn means greater presence of the Inter-Parliamentary Union in this type of situations. That is something that we should work to promote. We should not be merely satisfied with conducting discussions or denouncing certain actions for these things to be taken into account. I think that our role should be to be present in those situations, to be involved from the presidency of the IPU, but also from the presence of all those bodies that make up the IPU in order to prevent that such situations continue to occur. Thank you.
Baron.
Thank you very much.
Personas en el mundo.
Thank you very much. We know that there are many people around the world who are involved in this migration process. It's approximately 1% of the world population who is refugee, displaced population, or a migrant, and these figures continue to grow. So first of all, we need to understand that nobody leaves their home for pleasure. People leave because they are suffering, and this suffering is something that human beings usually inflict upon one another. There are some cases that are generated by climate change, but many of these situations where people suffer have to do with the fact that politics have failed people. And we as parliamentarians need, first and foremost, to ensure that we participate in an active and decided and organized way next year in the global discussion heading for the Global Pact on Migration and Refugee Populations. This is a compact that has not had a precedent in this planet, and that as the IPU, as an observer at the United Nations, should show that it has a dominant role as well as a speaking voice. So for this, I suggest that we organize field missions. It's very easy to sit in your office or behind your desk, but it's far more difficult, actually very difficult, to look at the suffering of refugee populations such as those that we see in Jordan, or the people who are stuck in Greece, or the migrant populations that we see in Central America. It is our role to organize missions in the field, and of course to conduct a political dialogue and to negotiate in the Global Compact on Migrant Populations that's going to take place in the United Nations next year.
So a question, Bangladesh, you can ask your question. Bangladesh, go ahead, please. Bangladesh.
Like to do first when you are elected.
So, Ms. Pasada, please answer your question. Have you heard the question?
La primera reunión.
The first meeting in the event that I am elected as IPU President will be a meeting with the Executive Committee where I would present the work plan, and we would there be presenting a proposal which would be to meet each of the president of the geopolitical groups. This in turn would entail traveling to each of those different places in order to implement our own agenda and our own proposals. We do not believe that it is possible to do a job by merely occupying the presidency or working on the executive board. We believe that our work should be present and thus be respected by all of the different currents that are part of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. So that is the first subject that we would address. We must also address the issue of participation in those subjects that are related to the United Nations work, and in those subjects related to women's rights and children's rights, boys and girls. These are the subjects that, in our view, need to be approached as soon as possible in an equitable manner and with an approach that is more participative. Last of all, I would like to say that the strongest commitment that I would have would be concerning the participation of women in the different activities that need to be conducted, and where we must show our respect through having a joint and common agenda.
Thank you, Ivan Pasada. And now I give the floor to Ms. Cuevas Barron, please.
First of all, I would like to say that I have had an extremely valuable opportunity to participate in many different meetings during my campaign and this particular stage of my campaign. And that has given me an opportunity to listen to the different opinions, the different proposals, as well as the needs that we have in our different parliaments and among our different parliamentarians. In this connection, one of their priorities should be to clean things up at home. And in that regard, austerity and transparency policies are very important, and we are now about to begin a new year, which means also starting a new budget. It is also extremely important to quickly advance in our agreements with universities and with academic entities that already have relations with the IPU, and also to work with think tanks in order to ensure that we have an ongoing vocational training capacity development program which works online as well as on a face-to-face basis. We also need to be updated on the global agenda. Let me give you an example. For example, the Global Compact on Migration and Refugees. There are already many meetings taking place around the world on this subject, and we're a bit late to jump on that train and to participate in that so important dialogue. But that said, we do need to encourage other conversations that have fallen behind, such as the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is very important in the whole agenda of climate change, and as well as the implementation on arms trade. There are a number of international agreements that are awaiting ratification, implementation, and of course the enactment of national legislation, as well as the budget that will contribute to transforming communities. All of these are very important matters. So as I have done throughout my campaign, this is something that I will continue working on, working close by through direct dialogue. These will be the tools and the main values that will guide my work as the beginning of the next presidency, if you be your vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now a question from Bolivia.
Bolivia,
Bolivia.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you a fraternal greetings from the multinational Republic of Bolivia. We women have seen that through youth and our own experience, all of us have made progress, and this is something that we have seen in the path of our development in respect of all our male colleagues and in the context of all of the struggle and empowerment that we have gone. Let me bring a short question, which is as follows. What proposals do you have for young parliamentarians once one or the other one of you becomes the president of the Inter-Parliamentary Union? And I would also like to add to that question that, of course, I wish that this will be a peaceful and democratic election, and that God will bless us and guide us in all of the work that will take place on election day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this question, and I ask Ms. Pasada to answer the question.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. We, as the Inter-Parliamentary Union, have not made as much progress as we would have wanted to have made in the area of youth, but also in terms of participation of youth in the different parliaments throughout the world. I don't think the problem is establishing quotas for participation of young people in parliaments, but rather creating or enacting those spaces that make it possible to renovate and renew each of our parliaments through the presence of youth. So in that regard, the IPU needs to be extremely careful in ensuring that all of these policies that we have been conducting at the IPU on the subject of youth are policies that actually are fulfilled. It is not enough to promote a subject. It is not enough to hold a forum. What we do need to have is closer control on the part of IPU in order to ensure that in addition to the paperwork and the talk and the participation in those assemblies, things actually get done. And what we do need to have is a study on why participation of young people has not advanced more and what are the problems behind this lack of participation. In the case of my own country, we have seen a renewal of youth among the parliamentary workers, and I have seen this in other countries as well. In particular, in the geopolitical group that I represent, we receive information through the Inter-Parliamentary Union on that subject, and the campaign that I have conducted over the last few months has involved communicating orally and in written form with all of you who are members of this group. Of course, we understand that we cannot incur expenses from our parliament to be present, but that is what we would have liked to have, a face-to-face exchange with each and every one of you in the different parliaments of our region. But this shows, of course, that we are very careful with the public funds, the public money, and I think this is not just our case, but it's more and more attention throughout the world looking at how we spend our money, in particular in parliaments, but also looking toward the governments. And here is where the Inter-Parliamentary Union needs to have a very important look at things.
Thank you so much. And now, Ms. Cuevas Baron, please answer Bolivia's question.
kindly allow me to approach the question by sharing with you a personal anecdote. As I told you, I joined politics when I was just 15 years old, and the first time when I was a federal member of parliament, I was 21 years old. Therefore, I think I can understand the concerns of young parliamentarians. First of all, because young people just don't like politics. When you are a young parliamentarian, basically you are fighting even against what your own friends think, the people that you live with every day. So you have to start working from the very beginning against the reputation of our reputation. Speak about parliaments, about parliamentarians, about the work that we do, and you need to be proud about the nature and about the honor of working in the parliament on behalf of the people. Secondly, I must say it's very difficult to be a young parliamentarian because many times you just don't have the training in order to work in specialized areas, in order to really work into the nitty-gritty and the details. For example, there are some commissions that do extremely technical work, and nobody explains to young parliamentarians how to be better parliamentarians. It is very difficult for somebody to give up time to train up the new generations, and therefore this platform, educational platform I mentioned, is very important because it's a platform not just for information but for constant support that can be used as frequently as necessary and that will allow young people to access that platform free of cost. There are many universities around the world that just are dying to give support to parliamentarians and help them make better decisions. Let me also say something about another important subject, which is our need to work directly with the national parliaments. There are many young parliamentarians, which frequently we see at the IPU meetings. There are many more parliamentarians than those we see at the meetings, and thus we need to speak with the presidents of the different parliaments in order to ensure that we have a highly more specialized work with young parliamentarians, dedicated work with these young parliamentarians. And even more so, we need to design better tools for ourselves to communicate with the young people who elect us. And thus we need to ensure that the enthusiasm that brought us to politics moves on to the young people who elected us, and that we're able to spread that enthusiasm to the young people who elected us, and that same enthusiasm to the communities and back to the Inter-Parliamentary Union. I think that this will not be an easy job. The opinion that many people have about politics is certainly not working in our favor, but I think that if we understand the needs of youth, and if we understand how to use the new forms of communication that exist throughout the world, our work will be far more efficient and with greater results. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baron. Distinguished colleagues, the next question goes to Iraq. Iraq, you're welcome to ask the question.
Good evening. I am from the Republic of Iraq. Iraq, which has suffered from criminal terrorist organizations, which has a very negative impact on the people, especially on women. 5,000 Yazidi women and from the different categories were sold as sex slaves. And I would like to ask the two candidates, what are the measures they intend to take in order to safeguard peace, stability, and security in the Middle East, because our countries are bearing the burden of these problems. On the other hand, what about the terrorist organizations which are being supported by some superpowers, providing them with weapons, training, and money, while we are suffering from all of this? And up till now, the IPU hasn't taken any position in that regard and did not undertake any activity in order to combat these criminal terrorist organizations and in order to support the countries that are bearing the brunt of these organizations. Will you, as candidates and potential presidents of the IPU, take any measures to assist our peoples and our countries to get rid of these problems? Thank you.
Distinguished colleagues, I would kindly ask you to formulate your question as briefly as possible. And the first question goes to Ms. Passada.
Gracias. Antes que nada.
Thank you very much. Let me first of all say that any personal statement made against terrorist policies that occur throughout the world needs that we all be aware that the first victims of these attacks are women, young girls, and boys. We need to be aware of this worldwide conflict situation that the world is faced with. We were just saying that earlier on today. I have no doubt that the presence of a woman at the head of the Inter-Parliamentary Union will help to promote dialogue and to seek peace. In each of those spaces and in each of those countries that are implementing policies, we need to be very strict concerning the use of nuclear weapons, and we need to speak against their use, and we need to ensure that there is fulfillment of the agreements under the United Nations concerning those weapons, and we need to ensure that the parliaments of different countries abide by those agreements as well. We know that this is difficult and that it is complex. But just like there have been missions conducted by the Inter-Parliamentary Union to these countries that are in a situation of conflict, we need to take a strong stance in that regard once we have become the president of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. This is something that needs to be addressed because it is something without which our future would be very complicated, and even more complicated in those places where day by day we see thousands of women, girls and boys lose their lives. There is where you can be absolutely certain that we will have a strong commitment concerning the respect for women's rights and the respect for peace, and where we will work to seek paths for dialogue between these different countries. We have offered the host country, if it considers it advisable, to hold a meeting with those countries that are facing a situation of conflict, if they wish to use the opportunity for parliamentary diplomacy on this occasion of this assembly, to understand that this is the very time, the very best time to hold such meetings. Let me give you an example. North Korea and South Korea. This is the moment for us to work on politics and parliamentary relations at a high level. That is why we are here, and if we want to do it, we certainly can.
And now, sorry, and now,
Microphone, please. The interpreters have not been able to translate the question. There was no microphone. All I can say is that from the IPU, we have the ability to achieve a lot because we have two very important committees, one for international humanitarian law and another committee for Middle East questions. As far as the rest is concerned, we also have our headquarters in Geneva. Now, why am I saying all of this? Because through our committees in the past, we have been able to achieve significant opportunities for communication. Not enough, but at least enough for progress. It is also very important for me to address the issue of the headquarters in Geneva, because we need to work with organizations and with bodies that work out in the field. That's where we have ACNUR, the International Red Cross Committee, ONU Women, UNICEF, many other organizations that I have also seen out in the field. I have had the opportunity to visit Syrian refugees in Jordan, for example. I've also had the possibility to see people's pain and suffering directly, as well as their joy when people finally get a roof over their heads, they get food in their plates, and in the case of children, maybe a backpack and a book to help them attend school. So yes, it is important to coordinate our work with those people who are working out in the field, and this is something where we have not contributed sufficiently as parliamentarians. So let me insist, it is very easy to criticize, it is very easy to take decisions behind your desk, but if we don't understand the reality that is present in different parts of the world, we can make a misjudgment and, of course, not act according to these situations. So yes, it's important that we have dialogues, such as was the case when I chaired the Committee on International Humanitarian Law. It is true we have conversations and dialogues with countries that are affected by different humanitarian crises or situations of armed conflict. We have also had the opportunity to organize missions and dialogue. That is true. So we need to take advantage of the opportunity that these commissions and committees of the IPU have in order to affect reality. We can use these commissions because there already is a significant framework of international law, and there's also, by the way, the law of war and the law of conflict. So many countries, for the time being, have simply not done what's necessary to put an end to nuclear weapons. Many countries have not ratified their commitments on human rights or in humanitarian law. So we also need to conduct a country-by-country analysis on the fulfillment and enforcement of our international obligations, and through our organization, we should then encourage the signing, ratification, and implementation of all of these international agreements.
Thank you, Ms. Kuvas-Baron. And the last question, dear colleagues. Well, unfortunately, we're pressed for time. Now the floor goes to Zambia to ask the last question.
I would like to find out from the two candidates what you intend to do for an African female parliamentarian, especially that we need to increase the numbers in these parliaments. If you've noticed, most of African parliaments, the numbers of females are quite few. They're just below even 40%. What do you intend to do for an African parliamentarian female? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I would like to give the floor to Kuvas-Baron first to answer the question.
Thank you. We'll do everything that we can to help women parliamentarians in Africa. And I was saying yesterday in the African group, I admire the strength of many African women who, in spite of the adversity, have managed to transform their communities and indeed their countries, and are now within many of their parliaments. African issues are development issues, and it's also related to inclusion, building a sustainable peace. It's going to be very important as well to support the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and the African Union and the Pan-African Parliament have decided to make that very important. Every year when the speakers of African parliaments meet, I've asked for us to have the opportunity to meet as well and to find a better legal framework to provide better opportunities for women. We can work in the political arena, but we also need to build opportunities, a real ecosystem that allows women to participate. For as long as women don't have places to leave their children in daycare or aren't economically independent, it's going to be very difficult for them to join a political party or stand for election. That's why we need to see better political participation of women, and that is the result of a whole series of issues that we can deal with in the socio-economic environment. So that is part of development issues as a whole. I think like in many areas of the world, in Africa, what we need to do is work within each national parliament, and of course throughout the region, I think we can do a great deal. Much of this has been said already by the African Union and in the SDGs. We have the objectives now, and what the IPU president needs to do is support all of these efforts that are already being made. And I'll be delighted to have the honor of leading that support for Africa, a continent, and allow me to say this, which has a great deal of similarities with Latin America. We have a process of colonization, decolonization, and a process now where we're trying to build fairer, more inclusive societies.
Dear colleagues, I sincerely thank you for your questions, very interesting questions, and I believe they're very much important for both candidatures, and I would like to extend thanks to Ms. Cuevas-Barron and to Ms. Passada. Sorry, excuse me. You see, we're so much in a hurry that actually I have forgotten to give the floor to Ms. Passada to answer the question about African continent, to answer the question of Zambia.
Thank you. I think women are multitaskers, and we deal with many different meetings at the same time. That's very common and well known. But what we were saying in the African group is true in our country as well. We have a very close relationship with this. I think Gabby said recently, since 1790, 17 million slaves arrived in Latin America and the Caribbean, many of them, most of them, coming from Africa. And they were taken in inhumane conditions. Our societies, particularly in Uruguay, we have a very high proportion of persons of African descent. And so we have emerged from this large number of slaves who came to the Americas. I think within the African group, women need to draw from the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to be promoting education and health for women. We need to ensure that there is better quality employment and better participation. And it's not enough just to achieve parity or political participation. We need to see women in decision-making roles. Decisions are taken in positions of power, and so women need to be in power alongside men in order to take the best decisions. So the African group needs more women to continue to promote the issues that women need to promote. So there needs to be not only a political commitment, but I have a very emotional commitment to that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Passada. Distinguished colleagues, now I would like to thank you for your questions. And on your behalf, allow me to thank our candidates, both Ms. Barron and Ms. Passada, for honest and sincere answers that they gave to your questions and the questions of the Women's Bureau, and I would like to wish you the best of luck at elections, and we're happy that we have an opportunity to choose, elect at the IPU Assembly a new IPU president, and it will be a woman. Thank you very much for participation in this discussion. Once again, thank you, Ms. Passada, thank you, Ms. Barron, for participation in this Q&A session. Distinguished colleagues, we have very little time left, therefore we should be in a hurry, but now we are supposed to elect 2 regional representatives to the Bureau for Women Parliamentarians, 1 regional representative from Eurasia Group to replace Ms. Shamal from Belarus, who is no longer an MP, and the end of her term, March 2018. And we're supposed to elect 1 regional representative from 12+ group to replace Miss André from France, who is also no longer an MP, end of her term, March 2018. Candidates were to be submitted from the concerned geopolitical groups to the Secretariat. Zeina, can I ask you to share with us the candidatures received from these geopolitical groups?
Very much. So we have received only 1 candidature for the vacancy on of the member of the Bureau from Eurasia, and the candidature is for Mrs. Ala Naumshik from Belarus. And we do not have a candidature for the 12+ vacancy.
Thank you, Zeina. Dear colleagues, now I would like you to elect this candidature. Unfortunately, we have only 1 candidature. This is for Eurasia Group. We don't have other candidatures from 12+ group. Dear colleagues, please, I would like you to vote by acclamation. So there were no objections and there were no questions to our new candidature. Thank you very much for your understanding. Now, dear colleagues, we are supposed to consider item 8 of our agenda, report of the discussions group rapporteurs. I would like to invite the 2 rapporteurs of this morning's discussion group to present their reports, Ms. Al-Khalesi and Ms. Al-Jepun, to make their reports upon the morning discussions. But I would like to invite you to the podium and take speaker seats.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, I'm pleased to report on the work of Working Group 1. It was chaired by Mrs. Gromurova from the Russian Federation. Our group focused on the links between technology and democracy, and in particular on how can technology be at the service of democracy and gender equality, challenge and opportunities. 18 delegates took the floor to share views and good practice on this topic from a gender perspective. We discussed opportunities that technology can offer to strengthen women's participation in social, economic, and political activities at the service of democracy. First and foremost, we agree that equal access for women and men to technology is fundamental. This starts with a gender equality policy for ICT, monitoring of the number of women involved in science and technology, exposing girls and women to technology through special training programs, providing online access, learning opportunities, and e-trade and e-commerce platforms for women in city and in rural areas. We also raise challenge that the cyberspace poses as it is also a space that can be misused or used with ill intentions. We talk about measures to prevent and respond to online bullying and harassment, hate speech, and other forms of cyber crimes that target women and girls. We also discuss action to combat trafficking in person, prostitution through the internet, we recommend that Parliament adopt proper legislation and policy to make cyberspace safer. Second, the justice system take on board the new development in registration relating to cybercrime and cyber violence against women. Third, women and girls have access to easily mechanism to file complaints of online harassment and intimidation, and young women should be protected in particular. Fourth, government and high-tech companies should address hate speech and online harassment as priorities, and by finding the right balance between security, right to integrity, and privacy and freedom of speech. Fifth, media should be educated to prevent all forms of sexism, gender stereotype, and hate speech. Last but not least, engage more women in science and technology. Colleagues, many of these considerations are already included in the draft resolution. We will consider with the chair of the group if some issues should be addressed in an even clearer way in the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sylvie Chapong. And I now invite Ms. Al-Laisi for her report. Please come to the podium.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. Dear colleagues, I am very pleased to share with you some of the main highlights of the discussions that were held this morning in Group 2. The group focused on the question of educating for democracy and gender equality at all steps of the ladder: family, community, and state. Our discussion was presided by Ms. Khan. We had 21 interventions from the floor, and here are some of the main points and recommendations that were discussed. First and foremost, we agreed that education and gender equality are both essential elements for democracy, and that educating for democracy must include a focus on gender equality. Gender equality education means challenging existing norms and gender stereotypes that undermine women's and girls' equal participation in all areas of life. For that, we need a cultural change, and we also need to fight discrimination. But how can this be achieved? As parliamentarians, we need to ensure accountability of governments towards crafting school curricula that are gender sensitive and budgets that are gender responsive, so as to guarantee access to quality education to all, girls and boys, women and men. Such education must be provided throughout the life cycle, and special focus must be placed on girls in rural areas who are the most underprivileged and the most challenged by poverty, hunger, and discrimination. For we know that if we educate a girl, we educate an entire generation, and this in turn transforms into sustainable growth. We also highlighted the important role of men, of women as mentors, of religious and political leaders, of civil society, of educational and sports institutions, and all those who have the power to influence cultural attitudes, who have the power to basically empower, so that they build a culture of equality in our societies and give our girls the confidence and the skills that are needed to advance. We consider that most of these elements are already included in a very good draft resolution. We could make proposals to further refine some of these ideas so as to make the resolution even more focused and useful to our work when we go back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Al-Laisi. Thank you for your statement. Thank you for the great work that has been done by the two groups and our moderators. Colleagues, I invite the forum to adopt the reports of the rapporteurs. The rapporteurs will draft some amendments to the resolution and will present the amendments to the Standing Committee on Democracy and Human Rights on behalf of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians. They will do so in consultation with the chairs of the working groups and the president of the Bureau and myself. So this work will continue, and I hope that we will take a very active part in these efforts. Colleagues, as for item 9, the venue and date of the 27th session of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians, I would like to remind you that the next session of the Forum of Women Parliamentarians will take place during the upcoming 138th Assembly in Geneva in March 2018. So, distinguished colleagues, we have completed our agenda for today, and I wish to thank you for your participation. I would like to remind all the participants that reception in honor of women parliamentarians hosted by the Speaker of the Council of the Federation of the Russian Federation will take place on October 15, 2017 at the Marble Palace at 8 p.m. And I would like to invite once again and to convey the invitation from Ms. Matvienko to all of you. We are looking forward to seeing all of you there at the reception. I wish you a fruitful 137th IPU Assembly in St. Petersburg. So I would like to thank you for your understanding, for your kindness and support, and for the contribution from all the speakers and participants. So as for now, the 26th session of the forum is adjourned.